Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Kufhei. We are 2 lines from the top. Says the Gemara. The Mishnah told us, concise ois achas nutrikan. If one writes a single letter, but he wrote it nutrikan in an abbreviated style. So although the minimum requirement for concise is 2 letters, but if he writes a single letter with an abbreviation which indicates that it's meant to represent a full word, concise ois achas nutrikan Rabbi Shua b'meseira mechayev. He says this is considered to be a full word, and he's chayev. The Chachamim Paitrim, they say no, he didn't write a full word. So apparently Shiur Daf looks at the meaning behind the word. It indicates a word, represents a word, even though physically, practically, he didn't write the word. This is tantamount to having written a word. According to Chachamim, we view at the practical side of things, he didn't actually write a word. He wrote a letter with a apostrophe, for instance. That is not reckoned as a word, and therefore he's patur. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra, menayin loshoin nutrikoin min haTorah. Where do we find this concept of an abbreviated word? Where do we find it in the Torah? Shenemar, ki av hamoin goyim nisaticha. Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, I have placed you as av hamoin goyim, the father of the multitude of nations. So the Gemara is going to be Dorish Nutrikan. The words av hamoin are actually acronyms, Rashi Tevis, abbreviated words. So Av is the Aleph and the Beis. Av nisaticha l'umais. The Aleph of the word Av indicates I've placed you as a father to the nations. Then we have the Beis from the word Av. Bocher nisaticha l'umais. I've placed you as somebody chosen, somebody special in the umais. We have the second word Hamoin. So we have a Rashi Tevis as well. Hamayin stands for number 1, Chaviv. This is the first letter, the Hey. The Marsha says Hey and Ches are written very similarly. Also, they come from the same source. They're rooted in the same area in the person. So in the throat of the person. So the Hey and the Ches here are interchangeable. And the drashi here is that the Hey of Hamayin indicates Chaviv nesaticha b'umais. I've placed you as a Chaviv, somebody cherished amongst the nations. Hamoin. So the next letter is the Mem. Melech nesaticha l'umais. I've appointed you as a king to the nations. Rashi brings the pasuk by Ephraim when Avram wanted to buy the Maras Machpelah. So Ephraim responded, "Nesi Elikim ata b'zeichenu." So Nesi Elikim indicates a king, a status of a king. Continues the Gemara. We have the Vav of Hamoin. Vasik nesaticha b'umais. I've made you distinguished amongst the nations. Neman, a trustworthy person, nesaticha l'umais. I've made you amongst the nations. So Avraham Avinu was held in very high regard. Hashem presented him, and Hashem influenced the attitude of the umais that they should hold him in very high regard and very high esteem. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan the Day Omar. So this was Rabbi Yochanan speaking in the name of Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra. Rabbi Yochanan himself found a different source to this concept, to an abbreviated word in Lashon Torah. He said as follows: Rabbi Yochanan Day Omar Anoichi. So Anoichi Hashem lekrecha. The word Anoichi Nutrikoin is an abbreviated word. It stands for Anon Navshi. I myself, this is Hashem speaking. Kasvis Yahavis. I've written the Torah and granted and given it. Some of us learned that Anon Navshi means it's a lashon of nefesh, it's rotzen. I have given over, so to speak, my own rotzen, my own nefesh. My own will is expressed in the words of Torah. I've given myself over to you. Torah is our perception of Hashem. When we learn Torah and we internalize the expression of Hashem's will, Hashem's light, this is our way of perceiving Hashem, our way of connecting Hashem in the highest form, the highest fashion. So in the Torah is embedded Hashem, so to speak. Hashem's rotzen, Hashem's will. Anon nafshi. Kasvis Yavis. Continues the Gemara. Rabbanan Amri. The Rabbanan had a different angle on the word Anoichi. It stands for Amira Ne'ima, a pleasant word, pleasant saying. Ksiva Yehiva was written and given. Ikad Amri. Others learn it differently. Anoichi Lemafreya. They expound on the word Anoichi in reverse. We begin with the Yud to the Chav to the Nun to the Aleph. So it goes as follows: Yehiva Ksiva. It was given and written. Ne'amonin amorea. So the Torah's words are trustworthy, are precise and accurate, referring specifically to Torah, where every letter, every word is precise and accurate. Dever of Nasan Amri. We have another source for the concept of an abbreviated word in the Torah. Ki yorat haderech negdi. So this was the story with the mule, where Bilam expresses anger and he hit his mule 3 times. And the Malach challenged Bilam. He says, "Why are you hitting him?" Ki yorat haderech negdi. What does this mean? Yara, that the your mule was afraid, was gripped by fear. Ra sonotza. She noticed the Malach, and therefore she strayed, she turned away from the path. So Yara is Rosh Tevas of Yara, Rasa, and Notza. We have a different source to the concept of a Rosh Tevas in the Torah. Carmel, this is describing the Minchas HaOmer, where they brought the grains, the barley, for the Mincha, and the Torah describes it as Carmel. So this stands for 2 words, Kar Male. It is filled. Kar Male is like the kar, like a pillow, which is full of stuffing. So here as well, the encasing, the housing of the grain, the Rashi says the kar of the kash is molehim, and is filled with the grain. It's still moist, it's still plump. Rabbi Yaakov Omar. We have a different source. This was David HaMelech speaking to his son. Don't forgive. Shimi ben Gera, he cursed me, a very expressive and extreme, very severe klala curse. So the word nimretzes here is nutrikon. It stands for noyefu. So Shimon ben Gera, he cursed David HaMelech. He claimed that he was unfit to serve as a king. He wanted the kingdom to return to Shaul. So he claimed that David HaMelech was unsuitable to serve as a melech. And the word nimretzes describes that. Klala noyefu, he committed znus with Bathsheba. Moy Avihu, the mem is Moy Avihu. He comes from Moyav, he's a descendant of Rus from Moyav. Ritzechu, he did Ritzicha because he brought about the murder, the death of Uriah Achiti, the husband of Bathsheba. Tzoyer, who is an enemy. To'evu, who is an abomination. He is unfit to serve as king. We have another source for the concept of the nutrikon in the Torah. Manedaber manetzdadok. This was Yehuda speaking to the brothers when they encountered the trouble by Yosef. He says, well, what should we say? Manetzdadok. So the word netzdadok here stands for the following words. We're upright people. Tzadikim manachnu, tohirim manachnu, dakim manachnu. We're pure. Kedoshim manachnu. We are Kaddish. Continues the Mishnah. HaKoisev beis oisios b'shtei alemus. So once again, what is the minimum share for ksiva? 2 oisios. So he writes those 2 letters, but it was b'shtei alemus. It took place in two separate periods of awareness. So he did 1 letter and discovered that he didn't have error. Then he forgot, and he proceeded again with the 2nd letter. Achas shachris v'achas ben arbaim. Or he did 1 in the morning and then 1 in the afternoon. Do we combine both letters? So Rashi actually learns that he didn't actually have a discovery in between, but since the time that elapsed was so long, 1 is the morning, 1 in the afternoon, that is considered as though it took place in 2 separate periods of unawareness. So the point here is that there was a yediyah, a knowledge, a discovery in between those 2 oisios. Can we combine them? Or does this yediyah separate them into 2, and they cannot be mitzvah and can be combined into 1 malach? We have Machlekes Machayev. He says this yediyah that takes place in between these 2 letters doesn't interfere, doesn't interject, and therefore they can be combined and is chayiv. V'chachamim paitrim, they say no, you cannot hold them liable in this case. But ma'ika miflagi, what is the point and basis of their machlekes? Rav Gamliel Savar ein yediyah l'chatzi shir. He holds that a yediyah, an awareness, a discovery regarding a half a shir, half a malachim, it's not reckoned with. That's insignificant. Taisa explains because the pasuk says, a person becomes aware of his chait, of an awareness that leads to a korban chatos. That's considered to be a significant awareness, a discovery that he did something which requires a korban. But a yediyah l'chatzi shir, knowledge about a half a malach, a half a shir, that's insignificant. So what did he find out about? He didn't find out about a malacha. It's not considered to be an awareness. Therefore, in our case, in our Mishnah, even though there was a idea between these two letters, that's considered to be a idea l'chatzi shir, and is not reckoned with, and we can combine those two letters, and he's liable, he brings a chatas. V'rabbanan savar yesh idea l'chatzi shir. They maintained even a idea which pertains to a half a shir, that's also considered, that is reckoned with, that is taken into account here, and that splits the malach into two, and we can no longer combine these two halves. Therefore, now Mishnah, we can't combine the two letters, and he's not chayiv. Hadran Allah chabayna. Continues the Mishnah. Reb Lezer Omer, we're going to discuss the malach of oireg, weaving. What is the minimum requirement? How many threads must he weave for it to be considered a shear of a malacha of oireg, a shear of significance? We have machlekes. Reb Lezer says it depends where he's holding. If he's initiating the weaving process, he's beginning. In that case, we need more. We need 3. If he's merely adding to a pre-existing weave, in that case, even one thread, we're speaking about horizontal threads. So the verticals are set up and the horizontals are being passed through. So even one is sufficient because it is mitzvah, it gets added onto the pre-existing weave, and therefore one is sufficient. According to Chachamim, they require 2 threads throughout, regardless of whether he's initiating the weave or he's merely adding to a material in the middle of the weaving process. Let's see the Mishnah. Reb Lezer Omer, ha'oireg shloisha chudim matchila. If he weaves 3 threads to initiate the weaving process, ve'achas al oreg, or one which is being added to pre-existing weave, chayav, is considered to be chayav and considered to be a malacha. V'chacham Omer, ben betchila ben beseif, whether in the beginning, whether at the end, it is the same consistent shear, shi'uroi beis chutim. We need 2 chutim. Now the first point out that we actually learned in Kuf Dalet that beseif, if it's really at the end, if it's the last thread needed for the garment, then certainly according to Chachamim, even one is sufficient. That has extra special significance. So in the Mishnah here refers to the term betchila and beseif. Beseif doesn't literally mean the last stitch, last thread. Rather, it means betchila means the beginning, the initiation, and beseif means somewhere in the middle. So in all these cases, you need to have at least 2 for a shear of malacha. Continues the Mishnah. We're going to proceed to the next malacha about Oiseh Shtei Batanir. So if one sets up these batanir, this is the setting up of the vertical threads to prepare them for weaving, to allow the horizontals to come through. So he sets up 2 batanir, explains what this means. Benirin, bekirus, different forms, different variations of setting up those verticals in preparation for the weaving. Benofa bekvara basal. This is a different type of category of setting up the verticals. This is not pertaining to weaving material, but rather to braiding, forming the nafa bekvara. Nafa is a sieve, kvara is a sieve, a more coarse sieve. Ubasal, when it pertains to braiding a basket. So if he sets up 2 batanirin in that process to prepare those things for their braiding, chayav, this is considered to be a malacha of oiseh shtei batanir. Now, especially if we get a picture of the some type of image of the ancient loom system, so we can fully understand what's going on here. So I actually noticed an ancient loom in action in a museum here in Toronto once. So the way it works is there are every piece of material needs to have threads going in 2 directions, right? We have the shesi and the erev. Shesi is the verticals going up down, and we have the horizontals, which is the erev going across right to left to right. So the loom is set up as follows. We have the chutim of the shesi, the verticals, going this way, and the horizontals need to be put through the verticals. So it needs to go above and under, above and under. Now this is a very tedious process to go and do it actually manually, one at a time. So it devised a mechanical system in which they would make it easier to allow the horizontals to be pushed through the vertical in one go, in one motion, all the way from one side to the other. How did they do that? Very simple. They took the verticals, so these are all the verticals going up, and they separated the odds from the evens. So they pulled apart the odd number, the set of the odd number threads. So here's the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. and they pulled that apart. They separated from the even threads. Number 2, number 4, 6, 8, 10. In this way, they created this space in between, which allows the vertical to be tossed right through it from side to side. Now, they would alternate. Then they would go pick up the evens and drop down the odds and throw the horizontal through again. So this was the process of the weaving, that they would separate the odds from the evens, pull them apart, which would allow the horizontal to go through from one side to the other in one motion, one go. And this way, the horizontal was actually above, under every other thread. Now, how would they actually pull apart these two sets of threads, the odds from the evens? Very simple. They would create these things called batei niren. Batei niren are these rings in which the threads would pass through. So every set of threads, the odds would have their set of rings, and the evens would have their set of rings. This way, they could control these two alternating sets, lift one, separate one from the other, and then lift this one, drop this one down. So they would connect it to batei niren. Batei niren was made by making this. It was a rectangle frame which had threads running vertically across it, and in each thread there was a ring. So it would make two of these frames, so that the chuti hashesi would pass through the frame. Each vertical thread going through an independent ring. This way, they would lift the set of odd number threads this way. They would make another frame for the even number threads. This way, they can separate the two sets in this manner. They have two frames full of these rings, and the threads would go through them. They have one frame for the odd numbered, one frame for the even number, and this way they can separate the two sets from each other. So the rings in there are the batei niren, and ha'oiseh shtei batei niren means preparing those verticals for weaving. So shtei batei niren means placing at least two. Shtei batei niren means placing two of these vertical threads through two of those rings into the batei niren, into those rings, to enable weaving. So that's the first example of ha'oiseh shtei batei niren. Now, beniren and bekiris are another two versions of the same concept. They're all based on the same concept of creating a system which separates the odds from the evens. So niren, the Gemara explains, it was a more simple, more primitive form of separation. So instead of having frames, they would have a simple bar, and they would have the vertical go into the connect to the bar in this manner. They would have a rope connected to the bar. Instead of having the strings with the rings, they would have a rope connected to the bar, and so this is the bar. They would have a rope coming down, and the vertical thread would come underneath that bar, and the rope would loop around one thread at a time. This way it would hold it in place. So the rope would come down from the bar, loop around one of the verticals twice. It would loop around twice. Then it would loop around itself. So the rope would loop around to keep those loops in place. And then the rope would go back up onto the bar, drop down again, loop itself around the second vertical thread twice, once raised above those loops to keep those loops in place, and go back up again and loop around the bar, come around again and do it again on the third thread, and so forth. So it would just control. It would be another way of controlling the threads and lift them up and down. So this was two rods, one for the odd numbers, one for the even numbers. This way, it would again separate one from the other, allow the weaving process to take place. So that was the second concept of beniren, different form of controlling it, different form of setting up the threads. And bekirus appears to be some sort of contraption used by the curtain weavers, more of a professional system where they employed some type of pedal system to alternate, to lift those frames. So this is another way of setting up the vertical threads. The concept here is the same, that the malacha of ha'oiseh shtei batei niren is setting up two vertical threads to prepare it for the weaving process, either by running those two threads through those rings, or having that rope loop around two of those threads, two of the verticals, or in the kirus, some other type of way of setting up the verticals for weaving. Continues the Mishnah, B'nafa b'kvar basal. So the same concept will apply to braiding the baskets, braiding the sieve, the sifter. What they used to do is they used to set up a very basic structure, basic frame, which will enable the subsequent braiding and weaving and production of this frame. So how did they do that? So these things were done by braiding together reeds, kanim. So first they set up vertical reeds going this way. And in order to enable braiding, they would have to just set up a simple structure to keep it in place. So once again, they would run two reeds horizontally. One looped around the top of these verticals to keep them in place, like around the rim, and one around the bottom. So it would be vertical reeds, and very crudely connected by one reed running horizontally on top and one on bottom. So this is the concept of shnei batanirin when it comes to the nafa, a sieve, a kvara, a sifter, more coarse holes, a sifter with sal is a basket. So they were set up in this manner, a very basic structure of a frame. So this is the shtei batanirin, one on top, one on bottom, one horizontal on top, one on the bottom, to keep it in place, to allow the process, to initiate the process of braiding and weaving. And once again, this is considered to be a melacha of oisa shtei batanirin. Concludes the Mishnah. Based furious. If one, we're going to proceed to another malacha of taifer. If one sews two stitches, meaning two passes of the needle, one in and one out, that is called taifer shtei furious. One pass and another pass. Al manas litvay beishnei furious. Or if somebody tears as a preparation to enable stitching two stitches, that as well is considered to be a malacha. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of Mishnah. When it comes to weaving, we have a machlekes. Rabbi Lezer says, if he's initiating the weaving process, then we require three threads to be woven. Continues the Gemara, K'asr Rabbi Yitzchak, Tanish Daim. He had a different version. He had a Mishnah, which had a girsa, where Rabbi Lezer says merely two threads are required, even at the outset, even to initiate the weaving process. V'anantan Gimel. But in our Mishnah, haven't we learned three? Like kasha, no kasha. It depends what type of threads he's using. Haba alimi, habektini. One is speaking about alimi, thicker threads. Habektini. The other one is speaking about thinner threads. Now, which one is what? So meaning, thicker threads require perhaps two, perhaps three. Thinner threads require perhaps two, perhaps three. We're not sure which way to go. Amrila lahagisa. Some said in this direction, some said in this direction. Different approaches to this distinction. Explains the Gemara. There were some that took one approach. They said, alimi, if you're using thicker threads, then you need to initiate the weaving process using three. Why? Three will not unravel. Trey sasri, merely using two sasri, it gets unraveled. Thick threads can't really grip properly. So according to Rabbi Lezer, you need to initiate the weaving process using three if you are using thick threads. However, when it comes to thin threads, two is enough. Ketini, when using thin threads, trei namile sasri. Two as well will not unravel, therefore two are enough. So according to this approach of the Gemara, there's actually no machlekes between two versions. Between our Mishnah, which tells us that Rabbi Lezer requires three to initiate because we're speaking about thicker threads. The version of Rabbi Yitzchak, which said two are sufficient, is speaking about thinner threads which hold in place and therefore are sufficient. So this is the first approach. Others had a different approach. Ketini, when you use thinner threads, only three are considered to be noticeable, discernible, and therefore they have significance. So you need to begin by using three. Merely two, they're not so noticeable and not so chashiv. So therefore, when you use thinner threads, we require three, and that is what our Mishnah is speaking about. Alimi, when using thicker threads, trei nami, even two are considered to be noticeable, and that is what Rabbi Yitzchak is speaking about. If he begins his weaving process using thick threads, even two are sufficient, two are noticeable and considered to be significant. Continues the Gemara. Tanya, we learned in the Bryce, we're going to have two Bryces. One is going to follow Rabbi Lezer Shita, and one is going to be following Rabbi Chacham Shita. Tanya, if one initiates the weaving process using three threads, ve'echad al erg, or he adds a single thread to the pre-existing weave, chayav. So this is Shiur Daf. Chacham Oimrim, bein betchila, bein besoif, whether initiating or adding, shiuran beis chutim. So according to Chachamim, it is consistent. The shear is always 2 chutim. Continues the Bryce. Ubesafa. Now let's say Rabbi Yochanan learns like this. We're speaking about a narrow piece of material. Now we're going to learn the next Mishnah that the shear of Ariga, of course, are 2 chutim, 2 threads being woven, 2 horizontals running across the verticals. Now, how far do they need to go? What is the shear of Ariga? How much do you need to weave? How much along the beg, along the verticals, do you need to weave? The Mishnah is going to tell us Meloy Hasit. It needs to be you need to go for a distance of between these 2 fingers. That is the shear of weaving. The Bryce is going to tell us a chiddush. What if a person has a very narrow piece of material? So the whole entire material is merely this wide. So the weave, the horizontal weave, doesn't need this much. The whole beged from one safa to the other, from one edge to the other, is merely this wide. Says the Bryce, indeed, in this case, we don't need a full shear. Ubesafa, beis chutin, if he weaves merely 2 threads, beroichav gimel batanirin, as long as it runs across 3 verticals, 3 rows of verticals, so it runs across 3 verticals, that's sufficient. That's considered to be a significant amount for the melach of erg. Why? Because it's besafa, it's running from one edge to the other. That's the entire beged. What is this equated to? L'erg tziltzil katan. For one who weaves a small, narrow belt. So the entire belt is very narrow. Of course, there as well it will be sufficient. Beis chutin, bereicha gibwatinirin, if he merely weaves 2 threads, going at a distance of 3 batanirin, 3 vertical rows, that is sufficient. Because the tziltzil cotton is only that large, that big, and therefore is considered to be significant. Ma'aseh Ariga. Concludes the Brisa. If one initiates the weaving process using 3 threads of echad al erg, or 1 to a pre-existing erg, chayav, he is chayav, stomach Rabbi Lezer. This anonymous statement, indeed, is in accordance with Rabbi Lezer, who differentiates between the commencement of the weaving or the continuation of a pre-existing weave. Tani idach, we have another brisa which says as follows: ha'erg beis chutin al gas. If one adds 2 threads, he weaves 2 chutin al gas on a large piece of material, so he's adding to a pre-existing weave. Val imra, or initiates the weave. Imra is the border, so they began with a border. So this is the initiation, and he weaves merely 2 chayav. This indeed is Shishis Chachamim, who don't differentiate between initiation or continuation. Rabbi Lezer Omer, afilu echad, when adding to pre-existing weave, even 1 is sufficient. And once again, the Bryce will go back to that case of Besafa, on this narrow piece of material, Shnei Chutim Reich Mishtash Betanir and Chayav. If he weaves 2 threads along 3 verticals, his Chayav on Mazadoima. What is this equated to? L'oirek tziltzil katan, one who weaves a thin belt, Shnei Chutim, using 2 threads, Al Reichav Gimel Batanir, and going along the stretch of 3 verticals, his Chayav. And the Bryce concludes about Eirik Beis Chutin Al Gas. If one adds 2 chutim to a large pre-existing material, Mala Imra, or he initiates the border of the weave, he initiates the weaving process merely with 2 threads, Chayav, because the malacha of Eirik is always going to be 2 threads. Stomach Rabbanan, this anonymous statement indeed is in accordance with Chachamim, who always require a shear of 2 threads. So in summary, we learned about the malacha of Eirik. According to Chachamim, whether it is betchila b'soif, 2 threads are required. According to Rabbi Lezer, it depends. If it is b'soif, if he's adding to a pre-existing weave, then even 1 is sufficient. If it is betchila, then it depends what type of threads he's using, thick or thin. And depending on that, we will determine whether 2 are sufficient, whether 3 are sufficient, depending on the 2 versions of the Gemara. Some say thick threads require 3, and the other shita says no, actually thin threads are the ones that require 3. Continues the Gemara, this is going back to setting up the verticals for the weaving process. And the Mishnah says, this is the verticals being put through those rings. And the Mishnah says, benirin. What is benirin coming to add? My benirin, Amar Abaye, it's referring to that crude, more basic way of setting up the verticals with that pole, So the verticals are being looped around the thread that's coming down from that pole, which is looping around each thread individually. So we said it was twice, looped twice around the thread, then once again looped around itself, right, raised above those two loops to keep those two loops in place. So that's what the Mishnah is referring to. Amar Abaye, tarti v'batanira, twice, to present, to encase the thread, the vertical, v'chada banira, and the third loop around itself to keep those loops in place. Bikiris, this is a third version of the setting up of the verticals. My bikiris, what is this? Amara matzavisa, this is the system employed by the curtain weavers, and this is also a form of, they have their own form of setting up the verticals. So if he sets up two verticals, that is considered to be malacha of oisa shtei batanir. Continues the Gemara, which concluded discussing sewing. Hatanina ba'avas malachas. We already learned sewing in the list, in the Gimel, in the Mishnah of Ayin Gimel. When the Mishnah listed all the malachas, we already listed sewing. What was the purpose of the Mishnah repeating it? The Mishnah doesn't appear to be adding any more details, any more halachas. We already learned Hatanina ba'avas malachas, v'atayve b'shnei tfiros. So why the repetition? Says the Gemara, Mishum the Kabbalah, the Mishnah Sefer, because the Mishnah wanted to conclude with saying v'akireya al manas litvar b'sfiros. Even if one merely tears to enable to prepare for stitching those two stitches, he's chayiv. So since the Mishnah wanted to proceed with that, so it began with that introduction. Ktani nami, therefore the Mishnah says as well, opens up by saying, hatoifer, sewing two tfiros is a malacha. Says the Gemara, if that's the reason, because we want to discuss a tearing, vakareya, hanami, tanina, b'avas malachas, that as well is listed over there in the avas malachas. That's not necessary to repeat it again. Ella says the more rather from the Kabbalah Mishnah is safer, because in the Sefer on Amud Beis, the Mishnah wanted to discuss the halacha of a kareya b'chamasei v'almeisa. One tears his clothing as an expression of in a fit of anger, v'almeisa, an expression of mourning. The Mishnah wanted to discuss that type of tearing. Therefore, the Mishnah began by introducing the whole concept. That's why the Mishnah began by discussing stitching, and proceeded with tearing kareya in order to enable stitching, and then proceeded with tearing his clothing as an expression of anger or mourning. Continues the Gemara about kareya al manas litva shtei. So one tears as a preparation for the subsequent stitching. How is this to be found? That one would tear to enable stitching? Says the Gemara, the avdaki kisasa, that the beged is puckered, it has some type of pocket, it's abnormally shaped, it needs to rip away that pocket, that puckering, in order to restitch it. So that's a karei amnas litvar. If he tears, he rips that apart, but he's not doing it to destroy, to ruin the beged, rather as a preparation for the repair process. Therefore, if he rips enough to enable two stitches in that area, that's considered to be a malacha of kareya amnas litvar shtei tfiros. Continues the Mishnah. Hakareya b'chamasai, if one rips his clothing b'chamasai in a fit of rage, v'almeisai, as an expression of mourning for his mace that passed away, v'chola makalkum turn, or any type of person who is engaged in an act of destruction, all these people, whether tearing out of anger, out of mourning, or just plain to destroy, p'turin, they are patur. Why? Explain the Farshim, because for Shabbos, we require a melechas machsheves, an act of importance, of a constructive act, that designs, that creates, not really destroys. So this is not considered to be a melacha min haTorah. However, in the Rabbanan, certainly this would be asur. Continues the Mishnah, but if one is destroying, not for the sake of destroying, but rather as a preparation for the subsequent repair, shiur k'masak, and this is considered to be a preparation for the tikkun, and therefore it's considered to be a malacha. Now, what is the shiur? Shiur k'masak, it is equated with the shiur of the tikkun. For instance, in the case of ripping that we discussed earlier, for the purpose of resewing, so the amount that he rips needs to equate to enable the sewing of two tfiros. So the two shiurim are equal and the same. Continues the Mishnah. We're going to proceed with several other malachis and their required amounts, shiurim. Shiur ha-malabin, what is the shiur of one who is malabin? He cleans, he washes for instance, the wool, he combs it, he dyes it, he spins it into threads. How much is considered to be a shiur? hasid kafel, enough fiber material which is necessary, which is needed to fashion a thread which is as long as reichav hasid. Now reichav hasid is from this finger to this finger, from the pointer to the middle finger. Kafel, double this amount. So a thread which is double this amount is considered to be the shear for these malachis. Concludes the Mishnah, one who weaves two threads. So once again, the weaving is conducted with the horizontal threads, pushed through the verticals. So how far does he need to go? The shear there is, if he proceeds at a distance of a malayasit from here to here. Continues the Gemara. So going back to the beginning of the Mishnah, if one is koireh b'chamasa, he tears his clothing out of anger, an expression of anger and a fit of rage, v'almeisoy, as an expression of mourning of abelis for his dead, is considered to be an act of destruction, and he's potter. V'raminu, we have a kasha from a brisa, which tells us otherwise. Hakoreh b'chamasoy, if one rips as an expression of anger, ube'evli v'almeisoy, expression of mourning on his meis chayav. So we have a stira. The Mishnah says potter, the Brisa says chayiv. Now the Brisa concludes with one thing. You meant to know, although he is engaged in chilul Shabbos, that's the grading of the Shabbos by ripping his clothing for expression of mourning, nevertheless, he was yotzei the obligation of mitzvah, the rabbanon, to do kriya for the mace, even though it involves chilul Shabbos. So in any case, we have a stira. In the Mishnah we learned, ripping, tearing, as an expression of anger or mourning, he's not held liable for that. He's potter. He is considered to be a makalkal, whereas the Brisa says he's chayiv. Says maloi kasha, there's no kasha. Haba meis day, haba meis alma. The Brisa which says that he's liable is considered to be a malacha, speaking of meis day, his own mace, his own relative, on whom he's required to express that expression of mourning and kriya. Therefore, is considered to be a constructive act. He's doing a mitzvah by ripping his clothing. The Mishnah which says potter, haba meis de alma, speaking about a mace, an ordinary mace who's not his relative. Therefore, there's no chiv, no obligation to do kriya, so it's merely an act of destruction. He's potter. Says the Gemara, for meisai ktani, the Mishnah uses the word meisai, his mace. Apparently, we're speaking about a relative. Says the Gemara, lo'olam meis today, we're speaking on his relative, meaning his relative that he actually he has a responsibility for some reason to go bury him. So it's meis today, it's incumbent upon him to bury him. But it's not necessarily a close enough relative which requires avelus or kriya, which is specific to those close relatives, parents, children, siblings, spouse. So although this person, this mace, is his mace, whether it's a relative or whether it's just a mace mitzvah, let's say, somebody that he actually is responsible for this person's burial, nevertheless, since it's not a close relative on whom he's required to express avelus and kriya, so in that case he's not being yet to the mitzvah by ripping his clothing, and therefore it's considered to be a kilkul, an act of destruction in his potter. Again, says the Gemara lo'olam mace today, speaking about his mace that he needs obligated to go bury. But he's not speaking about a relative, which is from those relatives on which avelus, expression of mourning, is required. Says the Gemara, but if this mace is a scholar, a Torah scholar, there as well, he is mechuyev to tear his clothing. The Sani is learned in the Brisa. Chacham shemes, a chacham who died, hakol kroivav, all are his relatives. Hakol kroivav salkadaitach. Do you mean to say all are his really literally his relatives? Ela ema, rather say as follows: hakol ki kroivav, all are considered like his relatives, meaning hakol kernel of all need to tear their clothing upon his passing. Hakol choltznol of all need to uncover reveal their shoulder as an expression of mourning. Hakol mavrinol of all need to engage in this suda called the suda's havra. This was the first meal that an avel would eat. He needs to be served by others. He can't eat his own food. This was eaten out in the chav, out in the square. So all need to conduct themselves in this manner. When a chacham dies, they're all considered to be his avelim. So apparently, even a chacham necessitates kriya. Says, well, it's shrichad lav chacham. Apparently, the Mishnah is not speaking about a chacham. Therefore, kriya is not necessary. The adam kashu, but if he's a righteous person, there again chiyuvei mechayiv. There as well, he's meant to express this expression of mourning. The sign is went in the price. Why does this happen? The person's children die young, so that he should weep and mourn upon the passing of a righteous person. It says in 1 second, so his children die so that in the future he should cry. They take a collateral from him. He didn't do anything wrong yet. It's an einish because as a result of the fact that in the past he had not cried vis abel nor expressed mourning al adam kasha on a righteous person. Shekol abaycha al adam kasha, one who cries upon the passing of a righteous person, they forgive him, atone him for all his sins. Bishvil kavish aslai, due to the cover, the honor that he did for this person. Farshon explained that when a person expresses anguish upon the passing of a righteous person, what he's doing is he's expressing his pain and anguish upon due to the absence of righteousness in the world, of goodness in the world. This in itself is an expression of a person's real ruts and real true desire to be good and to do good, and this is an expression of tshuva. And therefore, as a result, they are moichel his averos. So once again, we see that even for an adam kosher, one is obligated to express mourning. It says, we're speaking about lav adam kosher. The Mishnah is speaking about an ordinary person is not classified as an adam kosher, therefore kriya is not necessary. The lav adam kosher. Says the Gemara, 1 second, but if this person is present during Yitzias and Shama, when this person passes away, there as well, chiyuvim achayev, he needs to do kriya. The sign is we learned in the Brisa. Reb Shimon is ha'omed ala meis b'shas Yitzias and Shama, one who's present when the neshama leaves, chayev likroya. What is this equated to? The Sefer Torah shenisrafa, to Sefer Torah that burnt. Rashi says, because every yid, every neshama of yid is filled with Torah mitzvahs. The Ramban learns, because just as the words, the letters of the Sefer Torah are embedded in the parchment, the neshama of the yid is embedded in his guf. So when they separate, when they depart, it's as though the Sefer Torah was destroyed. So even by an ordinary person, a person needs to do kriya. So how can the Mishnah say he's potter? Because it's a destructive act. It's a constructive act. He's obligated. So apparently Mishnah is speaking about the neshama. He wasn't present when the neshama left, and therefore there's no requirement for kriya. So we answer the stira between the Mishnah, which tells us that if one is koreya as an expression of mourning, he is potter. It's an act of destruction, because we're speaking about a case where he has no obligation to do kriya. Whereas the Brisa, which says he's chayiv, is speaking about a case where he has a chiv to do kriya, for instance, a close relative, and therefore is considered to be a constructive act and regarded as a malacha. Says more Teinach Meisai. Okay, we understand that you've resolved the contradiction between the Meisai discussed in the Mishnah and Meisai discussed in the Brisa. Chamasa kasha. We still have one more kasha, one contradiction between Chamasai of the Mishnah, Hakareva Chamasai tears as an expression of rage, and the Mishnah says he's potter, whereas the Brisa says that if one tears in a fit of rage, it's chayiv. Chamasai kasha. Says the Chamasai namal kasha. That too is not difficult. Rabbi Yehuda, Reb Shimon. The Mishnah and the Brisa are reflecting different opinions. Rabbi Yehuda is reflected in the Brisa, and Reb Shimon in the Mishnah. What is the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon regarding a malacha she'eina tzricha l'guf? Of one does a malacha which is not needed for its own defined purpose. For instance, tearing his clothing as an expression of anger in a fit of rage. He doesn't need the actual clothing to be torn. It's not tzricha l'gufa. He's merely doing it to cool off his anger. He's doing it to address an issue, to remove a problem he has. So that's called a malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he's chayiv. According to Reb Shimon, it's potter. So very simple. The Mishnah, which says it's potter, is reflecting Reb Shimon's opinion. The Brisa, which says a person tears in a fit of rage, it's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Like Hash, you heard Rabbi Yehuda, Reb Shimon. Ha, Rabbi Yehuda. The Brisa is reflecting Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar, malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa chayiv aleh. Ha, the Mishnah is Reb Shimon, the Amar, malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa potter aleh. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Eimer the shamis le Rabbi Yehuda. When did you hear Rabbi Yehuda say that he's chayiv? B'misaken, when one does a malacha, and he's he's doing something constructive. For instance, he's removing the mace, as we had the Mishnah earlier, the mace from the home. So it's ein tzricha l'gufa, because he doesn't need the mace in Shesrav. He's transporting a mace. really unnecessarily. He just wants to remove the tumah from his home. So it's called Eino Tzricha L'Gufa. But nevertheless, it's a constructive act. He's transporting an item from here to here. He's not destroying. Therefore, he's chayiv. But b'mekalkel, when one destroys, such in the case of where he's ripping his clothing, an expression of anger, mishamas, like, did you ever hear that Rabbi Yehuda would hold him liable in that case? Amar Abin, haynami misakenu. In this case as well, it's considered to be masak, and he's fixing, he's doing something constructive. Why? The ka'avad nachas ruach liyisra, he's satisfying his yetzer hara. He's cooling down his anger. This is considered to be a constructive act, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, would be chayiv. Says, is one allowed to engage in this form of behavior? The Vatani, I haven't learned in the price. Reb Shimon Elazar Omer, Mishum Chilfa Ba'ikra. Shama, who said, Mishum, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Hamakarei Abgada B'Chamasa, if one rips his clothing as an expression of anger, V'Mashaber Keil B'Chamasa, he breaks his kelim in his anger, V'Fazer Ma'isa B'Chamasa, or disperses his money in anger, Yebei Necha, he should be viewed in your eyes, as he's worshipping an idol. Why? This is the craft. This is the formula of the Yetzer Hara. He begins with small things. Hayoim, today, he tells him, do something small, not something so severe. He opens the door, and he says, and tomorrow, he already proceeds further. He tells him to do something more severe. Until it gets to the point, it proceeds to the point, go worship Avodah Zarah. And indeed the person falls through. Once you open the door somewhat, you let the Yetzer Hara in, it can lead to very severe consequences. Omar Abavin, Mikra, where do we find this concept in the Pasuk? Lo yebucha el zar, v'lishtachel el necher. There shouldn't be within you an el zar, a foreign god, and don't go bow to a foreign god. And the Pasuk said, Lo yebucha el zar, in you. Ezu el zar. What is this el zar, this foreign god, sheish begufei shalad, that's present inside the body of the person? Havi omer. I will say, ze Yetzer Hara. This is the Yetzer Hara found inside, embedded in the person, who begins with small things, but then eventually that will lead to a person actually being oved of a desire, as the Pasuk says, Lo yebucha el zar. Don't allow the Yetzer Hara within you. Don't give him power, don't empower him. Because this will lead, this will lead to actual worship of a desire, to be bowing down to a desire. So apparently a person is not meant to allow any control of the Yetzer Hara. He should not break anything in his anger. So one is not allowed to engage in this behavior. Therefore, says Rashi, this is not considered to be a constructive act. He's actually hurting himself. He's reinforcing the Yetzer Hara. He's strengthening the Yetzer Hara. He's reinforcing that negative trait of anger within him. So it's considered to be a destructive act. So why would he be chayiv? Says, well, apparently we're speaking about the ka'avid l'mirma emasayin shebeisa. We're not speaking about an actual expression of real anger. He's pretending. He's showing an act of expression of anger. L'mirma emsa, to strike fear ayin shebeisa, on the members of his household, to establish authority. So he's doing this act which appears as an act of anger to accomplish that, and that indeed is considered to be masakin, a constructive act, and therefore he's chayiv. The Gemara bring some examples. Rabbi Yehuda, Shalom Matzvais, Rabbi Yehuda, he pulled out the rim, the bottom border of his clothing. He broke mani tvir, broken utensils, as an act of expression of anger. Rav Sheshes Ramila La'amse, he threw onto his maidservant Monini brine from small fish aresha on her head. Rab Abba Tavar Nachna, he broke the lid of a container. So these are merely pretending. They're merely pretending as being angry in order to establish authority in the home, and that's considered to be masakin. So in summary, the Gemara provided an answer to the apparent contradiction between Mishnah that told us that if one is kireya al mesa as an expression of mourning, he's pater, and the Brisa says he's chayiv. Now, ripping to express mourning is considered to be a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. It's not needed for its own defined purpose. He's ripping simply to express mourning for a mace. That's not considered to be tzricha legufa. He doesn't need the ripping for its own sake. So the Mishnah and the Brisa can both be following the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that even a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa is a malacha and is chayiv. Why does the Mishnah say it's pater? Because it's speaking about this mace is not one upon who is mechuyev to be karei, has no obligation to express this mourning. Therefore, it's considered to be an act of kilkul, merely an act of destruction. Therefore, he's pater. Whereas the Brisa is speaking about that the one who passed away is a close relative for whom he needs to express this mourning, therefore it's considered to be an act of tikkun, and he's chayiv. We have another stira between the Mishnah that says that he's korea, b'chamasa, his expression of anger, he's pater, and the Brisa says he's chayiv. The Gemara told us that this expression here is not real anger. He's merely coming to express this outward anger to establish authority in his home. Therefore, we regard it as a constructive act, an act of tikkun. Now, the Mishnah, which says that he's pater, is following Shittas Reb Shimon, who holds that a malacha she'enel tzricha l'gufa, such as in this case, it's not needed for its own defined purpose. He's ripping in order to establish authority. It's called enel tzricha l'gufa, therefore he's pater. Whereas the Brisa is following Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that he's chayiv. Continues the Gemara. Omar Reb Shimon ben Pazi, Omar Reb Shimon ben Levi, Mishum bakapar, Kol ha'moyred d'mois, Alodam kosher, one who sheds tears upon the passing of a righteous man. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Soifron, Hashem counts those tears, Umanichon, and places them bebeis gnazav, in his treasure house. Shenem Nudi Safarta, Ata, you've counted. Yeah, this is David HaMelech when he expressed mourning. Hashem, Safarta Ata, you've counted. Sima de Masi b'noidecha, place my tears in your flask. Haloi b'sifarsecha, are they not in your account? Amar b'damarav, call him atzel be'espeda shel chacham, one who acts lazily when it comes to eulogizing a chacham. He doesn't do it properly. Roi lekoyver b'chayav, he is fit to be buried alive. Shnemar vayikro isa b'gvul nachlasai. This is when they buried Yeshua. They buried him b'gvul nachlasai in his territory. Betimnas serach asher bar Ephraim mitzafain l'Har Gosh, on the northern side of Har Gosh. Now we don't exactly know what this Har Gosh, where it is. Melamed, apparently the pasuk is teaching us a lesson. Sherogash aleim har l'Horgan. The mountain trembled upon them, wanted to bury them, kill them, because they didn't eulogize Yeshua properly. Omar Abchir ba'abar Rav Yechon, call him atzel be'espeda shel chacham, one who's lazy when it comes to a hesped of a chacham. Eini marach yamim, he doesn't merit longevity, long years. Mida kedeged mida, this is a measure for measure. Rashi says because he didn't express anguish upon the untimely passing of a chacham, so he as well, min shamayim, they won't have mercy on him, they won't give him long years. Shenemar besasa b'shilcha turivena, besasa is lashon of sav, a measure. So Hashem gives an einish mida kedeged mida, measure for measure. Esvei Reb Chia ba'abel Rav Yochanan. So Reb Chia ba'abel challenged Rav Yochanan. The pasuk says, "Vayavdu ames Hashem." The nation served Hashem kol yimei Yeshua, all of Yeshua's days, v'chol yimei askenim, and all the days of the elders, asher harichu yamim acharei Yeshua, whose lives were prolonged after Yeshua. They apparently lived a long life, even though they neglected to eulogize him properly. Later, Rabbi Yochanan responded to Reb Chia ba'abel, who came from Bavel. He said, "Bavloi, Babylonian." It doesn't mean that their lives were prolonged. Yomim harichoy. The pasuk says harichoy yomim. Their days were prolonged, meaning they had good days. It's qualitative. They had good quality days. Shanim lo haricho, but their years, meaning their actual lives were not prolonged. Ela me'ata says, well, if that's the case, that arichas yomim is referring to something of quality. Leman yirbu yamechem v'mei v'nechem. When the pasuk says, if one learns Torah, his and his children's lives will be yirbu yamechem. The days will increase. Yamim v'lishanim here as well does mean that merely qualitatively, but not quantitatively. It says bracha shani. When the Torah is engaged in giving a bracha, apparently here it means literally prolonging of one's life. If one of the brothers died, all brothers need to be concerned, be worried. Perhaps the midas hadin shouldn't strike them as well. If one of the members of the group died, the entire group needs to be concerned. Some say the Meis Gadol was speaking about that the oldest one died. He's the head. So if the midas hadin struck the head, so all of them need to be concerned. Some say the Meis Katan was speaking about the youngest one dies, so the Klala, Rashi says, begins from the youngest one and works its way up. So indeed this is room for concern for everybody else, and all the brothers and the entire group. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with the various abbreviated words, ki av hamoin goyim nesaticha, onoich Hashem lekecha, ki yor tadechem negdi, karmel kolonim retzes, manadaber netztadak. The Gemara told us that a yediyah lechatzi shir is a point of contention between the Chachamim who say it's considered a yediyah, and Ramliel holds the yediyah midway, in the middle of a shir of malacha is not reckoned with. We proceeded with the Mishnah of ha'oireg. What is the shir of weaving according to Chachamim? 2 threads, whether it's at the beginning or it's in the middle of the process, according to Rabbi Lezer. If he's adding to a pre-existing piece of material, then even 1 thread is sufficient. If he's initiating, then it's either 2 or 3, depending on the type of thread he's using, as discussed in the Gemara, either thick or thin. The Mishnah told us about the malacha of oiseh shnei batei nirin. We learned about toifer. The next Mishnah told us the malacha is involved in production of fibers, and we had a stira between the Mishnah and the Brisa regarding koreya, al-meisa, and mechamasha. The Gemara resolved the stira. We concluded about the importance of being maspid, eulogizing a chacham, and the schar, which comes to a person who is moyer demois shatirs al adam kasher.